Welcome to the Point News interviews, and today it's good to have Dan back again for a conversation. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Daria. Great to see you.
It's great to see you too. So, today I want to discuss BRICS as there was some news on social media about BRICS. The recent BRICS Summit has just wrapped up.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on it, on that event?
Well, I think it's a historic event. I think it shows that a new world is in birth. A lot of new countries have been added to the BRICS, including Cuba, Vietnam, Indonesia. Already there's been some real gains from it. India and China, are resolving an ancient border dispute because of the BRICS. Even that Vietnam is in the BRICS with China, they've been historic enemies. In fact, the last time those two countries had a war, it was against each other in 1979. So I see it as very positive. Even the Secretary General of the United Nations showed up, which was controversial, but I think good. And so, look, I think it's a positive development for the world to counter U.S. hegemony, which has been, I think, one of the biggest problems in the world for a long time.
What significant decisions were made?
Well, one, they're not yet ready, I guess, to create their own new currency, but they are going to create a new economic trading policy, which will allow them to trade outside the U.S. dollar. And after they announced that, I read that over 150 countries said they wanted to sign up to that. So that's incredible. I mean, I think that's the big thing that happened there. On a smaller thing, Venezuela was vetoed by Brazil to be a member, which I was disappointed in. But on the big thing, this new exchange, economic exchange program, I think that's a good thing.
So you think they're not? It's not possible for BRICS to create a single BRICS currency?
No, I think they will eventually, but I guess some people thought that's what would come out of this meeting, but it didn't. I guess they weren't ready to pull the trigger on that, but I think that will come. I think that will definitely come.
If that would come, could it impact the dollar?
Oh yes, I mean the dollar's already being impacted by all this. The dollar's king, but I don't think it will be for much longer, which will hurt people like me. I mean, obviously, I live on the dollar. Right now, if I go to Russia, I can get almost 100 rubles for a dollar. That's great for me. In many countries, similar thing. So I will be hurt by that. But I think for the world, it's good. I still welcome it because the U.S. is able to blackmail most of the world because of the dollar dominance. And I think the BRICS system will, over time, undermine that.
In your view, what does the future hold for BRICS in the coming years?
I'd like to see BRICS become a worldwide phenomenon. I'd like it to develop, frankly, into a new international order. The old order's dead. The United Nations is dead. I mean, it exists, but it's completely useless. And the UN system, some of the, legal organizations that have come out of the UN, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, are completely useless as well. And international law has been destroyed on purpose, mostly by the United States. So I hope BRICS will essentially, end up taking in most of the countries in the world and creating a new legal order, a new world order. frankly, that looks like what the UN had envisioned, where each member state has an equal vote. They're all treated equal, no matter if you're a tiny island or a giant, powerful country, right? That's what I hope comes out of this. Right now, that system has been destroyed, and now it is a country ruled by the mighty, and that's not how it should be. So I hope the BRICS changes that.
Is BRICS primarily focused on political issues or economic matters?
I think economic. I mean, I think the politics they try to keep behind them because they have China that's communist. They have other, the other countries for the most part are capitalist, although Vietnam is also communist. They don't really have an ideology. And so I think it is very economic centered and not political centered at all, except to the extent that they value national sovereignty, if that is a political issue. But aside from that, it doesn't have a political flavor. It can't, because you have countries of diverse political ideologies.
What are the future prospects for the new BRICS Development Bank?
Yeah, so the new BRICS Development Bank, I think, has a lot of potential that's not being used now. Again, I hope it will be an alternative to the IMF and the World Bank, which are more used by the West to keep countries indebted rather than to encourage real development. I hope that the BRICS Development Bank serves the real purpose of true development without, bringing countries in the global South into debt. So that again is the goal. There has to be an alternative system to what we have, which is an unjust system.
My next question is about Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. I hope I pronounced correctly. He was present at the BRICS Summit, right? Should we anticipate a resolution to the Palestinian-Israel conflict, or is his visit motivated by other objectives?
Well, Abbas is a sellout. He doesn't represent the Palestinian people. He is an Israeli pawn, is the truth of it. I was in the West Bank last year, and most people have no respect for Abbas or the Palestinian Authority. They operate to carry out Israel's will. So I think the fact he was there is symbolic. I think that the BRICS countries, by and large, will support a Palestinian state, but Abbas is irrelevant. He's also very, very old, and he's going to die soon. And I don't know who will take his place. Maybe someone good, I hope. But he's irrelevant at best. Is the Palestinian conflict going to be resolved? Not anytime soon. No, of course not. I mean, sadly, it's going to be resolved through the battleground, through the war, and it won't be resolved through negotiations. Is the truth of it. I mean, that's how I see it.
That's a sad truth.
Yes. Well, it's true in Ukraine too. That's not going to be resolved through negotiations. It's going to be resolved by Russia winning the war. It just is. There was a chance for negotiations in Ukraine to work. There was a chance for negotiations in Gaza to work. But, in both cases, there were people who undermined those negotiations and destroyed them. In the case of Palestine, it was Netanyahu who undermined the negotiations. In the case of Ukraine, it was the United States and the United Kingdom. So given that, it will now be those conflicts will be resolved on the battlefield.
Maybe there is some more chances for negotiations for them. Perhaps.
I think, though, that, in the case of Ukraine, it's going to be because Ukraine's willing to make huge concessions. I mean, Russia won't make any concessions. they've won the war largely, and they will keep pursuing the war until they get what they want now. They were willing to give up a lot. In March of 2022, a month after the war started, Russia was willing to enter into an agreement in which Ukraine would have kept all their pre-SMO land holdings. That's not on the table now. They're not getting back those 4 regions that voted to go with Russia. Those will never return to Ukraine.
What is your prediction for the next decade?
Well, if we survive, if we don't have a nuclear war, I think the BRICS will rise, the East will rise, and the West will decline, just like the sun. The sun will rise in the East and it will set in the West. I think the West's time for domination is over. I think Palestine will be free. I think Zionism will be dead. Again, if we can survive, I think it will be a better world. But I think, we have to avoid World War III to get to that point.
What can present, activists do to help avoid the World War III?
Well, we need to organize a very broad peace movement, and we've had those over the years, and we need that. We need the people of the world to come together, take to the streets and say, we don't want war. We certainly don't want nuclear war. We have to have very broad-based movements in support of peace. And I think that's possible.
Yeah, I'm sure we all want to live, continue this life.
Well, yes, of course. But people have to understand it's an issue. People understand that life is hanging in the balance, that nuclear war is possible and maybe even likely at the moment, unless things change, I think not enough people realize how dangerous of a world we live in right now.
I think they don't realize it because they're not interested in politics, news, and what's happening. They're not learning. They're not interested. They're not trying to find out what's happening, what's going on. I think that's the issue too, that people, they don't want to consider and be concerned about it.
I think that's part of it. But the truth is the mainstream media is not educating them on the things they need to be educated on. The mainstream media is not focusing on the dangers of nuclear war. It should be. But that's not happening. That used to happen. I think the mainstream media is doing the bidding for the most part of the governments in which they reside. They're not acting as the brakes of the government, which is what they should be doing. And so to the extent people do follow the news, they're not being educated. They're being miseducated is the truth of it. So there's a lot of work to be done.
And I wanted to ask you about the election 2024. What's your feeling about that Donald Trump is a winner?
Well, first of all, I'll let you know. So I live in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state. I voted for Dr. Jill Stein, a third-party candidate. I wasn't going to vote for either of these candidates. For different reasons, I didn't like either one. I did not want Trump to win, but I wanted Harris to lose, if that makes sense. I think she and Biden needed to be punished for what they're doing in Gaza, and they were punished. A big reason she lost is Democrats did not turn out in the numbers they did in 2020, and they didn't in part because of what's happening in Gaza, and I'm glad of that. They needed to be shown a lesson. With that said, Trump was elected, and he appears to be as big of a warmonger or more so than anyone, with his pick of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, his pick for UN ambassador. She's very pro-Zionist, as is his pick for ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who's the Christian Zionist. So look, we didn't have, neither one were good options. We were presented with two bad options. It was like being asked if you want to die by drowning or hanging. That's how it is. I mean, which shows America's not much of a democracy, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, and there was a lot of independent candidates to presidential elections, but I think they're just like they didn't had any chances at all.
No, but they did have a chance to be spoilers. They did have a chance to make a difference in the election, and that's important. And we need to build third-party organizations. We need alternatives to the two big parties. We're not close to building any that could win. You're right. Not a national election, though they could win more local, regional ones. But a point was made by voting for them, especially for Jill Stein. That was a vote against the war in Gaza. And I think that made an impact, and that was the best you could do in this election.
Do you believe that Trump is going to end the war in Ukraine as he promised before, while he was being elected?
I think Russia won the war in Ukraine, maybe even before Trump's inaugurated. I mean, again, it's going to be won largely on the battlefield. And I don't think Trump will end the war in the Middle East. In fact, he may end up expanding it. Those are my opinions.
Thank you for answering my questions, for this good conversation. I think it's going to be helpful for our audience.
I enjoyed it, and I appreciate the questions. They were good questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Always a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.